Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Women Who Code podcast. Today's topic is being a technical evangelist and a developer advocate in the open source ecosystem. I am your host for today. I am Bhavya. I am a product manager and a Web3 evangelist with Xponents Ventures Private Limited and a leadership fellow with Women Who Code blockchain track. And today I have with me Divya Mohan, who has a decade of industry experience and has assumed roles in senior engineering, people management, technical writing, community building, and developer advocacy. Having worked extensively alongside students, developer communities, enterprise teams, academics, and senior EXCO members in different capacities, her focus is in the development and outreach strategies via the establishment of user personas and identification of target audiences in the remit of cloud native tech. With extensive technical and community building experience in client facing and leadership roles, her aim is to continue enabling clients towards maximizing their outreach and amplification of their message in an advisory capacity. Welcome, Divya. Super excited to have you here today.
I'm excited and thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be on the podcast and chat with other women in tech. So it's always a pleasure.
Great. So let's get started with it. So, to start with, can you tell us how you first got interested in tech?
To be very frank, I think the reason I started off in tech was because, as part of my schooling, I was naturally very inclined uh, you know, to the sciences, and I was inclined to the arts as well. Like those were, I mean, I know that now it sounds very cliche to say that I liked both, and I picked science, but genuinely, I could pick whatever and I wanted, and I picked science, and it was not because of peer pressure or parental pressure. I genuinely had an inclination toward physics in particular, and actually I wanted to be a PhD. I wanted to take a PhD in physics. That was my initial aim, but I quickly pivoted to software, not software in events. I mean, it was software eventually, but not software in the starting. I first graduated in electronics, and then pivoted to software engineering. So um, my interest was always there. It was a matter of tapping into the interest in an eventual capacity. I don't think I have had a very straightforward journey into tech, the industry as I know it right now, but it's been a very interesting journey so far.
Yeah, I think most of us have ended up in tech just by accident, right? So what
Yeah.
so what was like the formative experiences or the turning point that led you into the tech? The first like the first encounter with tech. How did that happen?
Right. So I clearly remember that, the very first encounter that I had with programming, or, um, coding, or whatever you call it, development really, was before, what we call as, junior college in Maharashtra. So it is 11th and 12th grade for the rest of India. So in the summer vacations between the two, I ended up enrolling for Java and C++, just because it was fun. I mean, I clearly was a nerdy kid. I did not understand much. I mean, at the age of 14, I barely knew anything about coding, but I was like, this sounds interesting. Did not understand much. Majorly flunked the exams that were there as part of the fun course that I joined. And then I was like, okay, maybe software is not, where my interest lies. And I then quickly pivoted into getting into engineering, which was not software. So that's why I ended up taking electronics, because I was like, I think I'm not really good at writing software or developing software. So then it was electronics for another 4 years after my 12th grade. And yeah, I mean, then I eventually pivoted back to software. So yeah, I mean, it's a very strange path now that I look back at it, but that was
Right.
the very first pivot movement that I remember, because Honestly speaking, I don't think a lot of people think at the age of 14, right after you complete your first major exam, that coding is the first fun thing that you can do. But I thought that, so I think that was the first moment.
Right. And it sounds amazing. And we would definitely like to know more about the first wow project that pulled you back into engineering and softwares.
Yeah, so basically what happened is, after even I graduated from electronics, I ended up doing a lot of systems engineering. So for a major chunk of my career, up till maybe like um I joined my second employer, which was HSBC. I was primarily doing all sort of systems engineering work, continued that in HSBC. But then I think I got the opportunity to work on my development skills. I wouldn't say development skills full fledgedly, because it was just writing scripts. It was just like
Oh,
basically writing shell scripts and bash scripts for automation.
yes.
But then I was like, hey, this simplifies lives, doesn't it? So maybe we can actually pivot back to sort of dabbling with software again. And then I started onboarding myself into the front end side of things. Learned HTML, CSS, JavaScript. I'm not going to say that I'm really great at coding or programming even today, because I clearly lost a lot of headway which I could have gained had I actually done a computer science course or majored in computer science as opposed to electronics. But I think I'm fairly good with the basics, and I can easily translate between languages. So I mean, I can figure out what works in one language and how to actually carry that into another language framework. So I have that mental model there. And I think
Right.
that's what matters in like the
Yeah,
whole of the industry, right? Like that's the basic concept that you need.
completely agreed. I think adaptability is like something that's the most important
Yeah.
anywhere in the tech space. With the pace it's changing, that's especially important. So with a lot of this tech coming in, eventually you start feeling overwhelmed. So it's very
Hmm.
important to have certain role models in the picture. So did you have any important role models that helped you through your journey and motivated you to take on tech?
Oh, so role model wise, I think like my very first role model with respect to tech, um, like it was my cousin sister. She's actually a PhD. So now you realize where I got the PhD gene from. So yeah, she's a PhD, and she now lives in London. She's doing cancer research and cures for cancer, stuff like that. So I know that's not the form of tech that we were looking at, but she was my very first inspiration, so to say. I was like, this is possible. You can actually do things, and that's beyond like um the standard roles that were sort of assigned to women back then. So I mean, as women, I mean, you're not really encouraged to take science as an option. My parents and my whole family have been very encouraging, touch wood. But in general, that's not the case. I know that very well. So it was nice to have a role model in the form of my cousin sister, who actually is a PhD. She's not was, she is a PhD. She'll probably kill me if I say was. So she is a PhD, and she works. She still currently works on researching cures for cancer and stuff like that. So yeah, she was my very first role model. And then of course, I've read about a bunch of women. I am a completely bookish person. I'm a bookworm, so I read a lot. And as many historical figures come and go, I am like in awe of all the women who've come before us in tech, who've paved the way for us in tech. Specifically, Marie Curie was the first person I came to know about in that regard. And then of course, pretty recently, I think I don't think it's not a couple of years back, more than that, but I read about Ada Lovelace, who was the first programmer. And I actually have one of these comic books that were illustrated by I don't remember the author, but it was one of those. And uh, to me, I didn't know that. she was the first programmer. I always assumed, because that's what's told to everyone, right? Like Charles Babbage is the father of the modern computer. That's what's told to us. So I mean, I've accumulated a fair amount of role models along the way, but my very first one would be my cousin sister with respect to tech, at least.
Yeah, I think it's great to have role models in family, and I think they do imbibe some kind of values that helps us kind of easily adapt into the diversity and inclusivity spectrum of
Yeah,
community. Yeah.
yeah.
So moving forward, what was your relationship to open source when you got started? As you said, you explored a lot of things while you were entering into it, so you definitely had a relationship with open source. So I
Actually,
would
it's
love to
very
know.
funny. It's very funny that you asked that, because to be very frank, I knew open source, like I knew just one open source project, and that was Linux. Like that was it. Like that was the know all and be all of my knowledge. I did not know anything else. And I worked on Linux because I was a systems administrator. So I
Right.
worked on Linux and it was like, okay, this is great. It's cool. So I know how to work this. And then the turning point came during, I think, the Kubernetes, wave of things. Like 2019 was when, I actually got exposed to Kubernetes as a project, and
Right.
that is how I entered into the whole open source ecosystem, like full-fledgedly as a contributor. Because when I started out, Linux was the only thing I knew. I genuinely knew only about that, and I was like, oh, okay, this is cool, it's free, that's, and of course I knew Android and stuff like that. I was like, oh, okay, it's free, the code is available, you can see it, great. I mean, that's all that I knew. But I feel like I've come a long way since then, because I basically knew nothing, and I just assumed that what's open source is always also free. And now I work in an open source company, and I know that's not true. So yeah, so that was my relationship with open source, and I think I've come a little ahead from there.
Yeah, I think the initial perspective everyone has about open source is that it's free, so I don't know how to trust it and how does it not get stolen. So I think yeah,
Yeah,
that's some common questions like all of us have had at some point or the other.
yeah.
Like you entered a very new space, you switched industries. So was there a role of community in developing in your career? Like a community plays a lot of
Oh,
role in
sure.
developing your career.
Sure. I mean, I genuinely think that without the support of a lot of people within the open source community, I wouldn't have been where I was. Primarily because I did not know a lot about this community when I was, working in the silos that was my job before. And I don't blame anyone, and I'm not, this is not to, throw shade also at anyone saying that, oh, you are responsible for this. No, that's not what I mean. It's just how things are. It was how it was. Like I did my job. I did whatever I was supposed to do, went back home. But when I wanted to start learning, I found the tribe of people that I wanted to learn alongside and grow alongside. And I think they have played an invaluable part in who I am today, because um, like it or not, we're social beings, right? So when we interact, obviously, you influence me as much as I influence you in some or the other capacity. Correct. So at the end of the day, I think that my community had a huge role to play, like not only from the perspective of teaching me things or being really patient with me, because open source is a very very different ecosystem when you compare it to what you have in your day to day job. Like it's very different. Like now that I'm in a company that is primarily open source, I can tell you that it's very different working in these two worlds. So it was a refreshing change, and it would have been very intimidating had I had no one to support me along the way. It would have been extremely, like, if people were like, okay, we don't want you here, I would have probably not been here, right? So there were people, there are people, and that's what I like about this community. So it played a huge part in welcoming, ensuring that I felt welcome, and
Yeah.
teaching me a lot about things that I should probably, know more about when it came to community. And I'm so grateful that I found them.
So all of us like do appreciate community once we are in it, but I've seen a lot of people having cold feet while trying to join a lot of communities. So how was it for you? Like, how did you ease into the community structure? Because it's not very standard in our in our school lives. It's something new that we enter when we like start learning about tech. So how did
Yeah.
that transition happen for you?
Yeah, so I was very intimidated. To be very frank with you, I lurked a lot. Like, I was a lurker for a really long time. I did more research than actually speaking up at places I should have spoken up in retrospect. Because from my perspective, when I tried entering open source, I was an already experienced professional. I had 6 to 7 years experience under my belt, right? So it was like, people will think I'm stupid. That's the first thing that comes to your mind. People will judge me. People are going to say, oh, you know what, maybe, she doesn't deserve to come this far, or maybe she doesn't deserve to be in the community. So I did my research. I attended virtual meetups, and luckily for me, the pandemic, I mean, I should not say this because it is going to sound really wrong, but luckily for me and unluckily for the whole world, the pandemic started in 2020, because I had a lot of time to do my research, to attend virtual conferences, to ease myself into a community of people I had never met before. So I I always tell my friends that I know I appear to be a very extroverted person, but if you see me at conferences, you probably will not see me anywhere at any of the parties after a conference. Like, I am like genuinely tired after a day of interacting with people. So for me, those 2 years, that buffer that it gave me, that was my easing into the community. So it was attending virtual meetups day after day, and I helped organize a community event in person just before the pandemic ended. So I had like a lot of friends from there. I made friends, which is like a huge achievement when you reach your 30s. So that
Yeah.
was another milestone. And it was like, after that, I just eased myself in by attending meetings, meetups, conferences online. And when the time finally came for the world to open back up, I was ready to actually dive right back in. It was like seamless for me. But before I did all of this, I lurked, and I figured out if you know I could fit in. I could fit in with the culture of this community. What are the ways and mannerisms, because every community, whether you like it or not, they have their ways, they have their mannerisms, they have certain rules that you abide by, they have certain things that you say and you don't say. So you have to sort of figure that out, and that takes research, that takes a lot of lurking. So I did that first, and then I went into like meeting or online or virtually, and then I went to the actual part. I know that a lot of people might not have that luxury, and I hope we don't, because I don't want another pandemic. But yeah, that was my journey. So I mean, the pandemic helped me in a big way, but I'm also very, very, very um not thankful for it happening, because I was hit by a very bad COVID bout as well. So I get the whole part of it being the worst, thing that has happened to us, but
Yeah.
it also mysteriously worked out for me. So yeah,
I think it made us all embrace the beauty of slow living and is just trying out things that we are curious about. It just gave
yeah,
this that courage to okay, like to just try it out.
yeah,
Yeah, amazing. And I remember you saying that you love reading and you've been a bookworm. So I
yeah,
think writing was your comfort zone. So how did
yeah.
technical writing like play into your career?
So actually, I did not have any formal plans of making this my career. So before I joined open source and I finished my majoring in engineering, I did this really short stint for social media management where I was a content writer for a digital media company, and I was also like a social media manager for their brand. So I had my stint with social media management and writing, and I also wrote for a newspaper after that. Like I covered the general elections of 2014 for TNA, which is a newspaper in India. So I had my fair share of writing under my belt before I actually attempted things.
Yeah,
And anybody who knows me also knows that I read a lot and write a lot. Like I'm crazy about like books. Like my father and mother have actually told me not to bring any more books inside the house because there's no space now and we're shifting. So they're like, please don't get any more books inside the house because we're packing things up and to get like newer boxes every time you just get new, you just travel anywhere, you like get 10 books and come, and it's not really feasible. So technical writing was not on my radar. I knew I was good at writing. I knew I was good at reading. I mean, I loved reading. But open source actually opened this door for me because when I realized that in the community there were like, um, you know, docs that needed to be edited, documents and websites that needed to be edited. I was like, hey, that sounds like something I can do. And then there was the Google season of docs that happened
yeah,
in 2020, and I was like, huh, seems interesting, and I was like, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. And the first community that I approached was the community that I worked with, which is Kubernetes. And they were like, but you're not a technical writer, so we can't really accept you. I was like, okay, no problem. I'll give some other organization a shot who can actually, take on inexperienced technical writers.
yeah,
So I ended up applying to CERN, which, was I didn't completely expect to get. And I was like, I got shut down by my own community. What are the chances that somebody else accepts me? So CERN actually made me go through like my mentors at CERN. They made me go through like um, the technical documentation that they had for a data management system named Rusio. So that data management system actually collects data from the Large Hadron Collider.
yeah,
And they basically told me, you know what, read through the entire documentation of Rusio and just, sort of make a sort of summary or a document about what this particular aspect of Rusio does. So I did that, and then I applied, and I was like, oh my god, I got it. And it was a whole 3 months of working with Sun and figuring out the hows, whys, and whats along the way. But that was my first stint at, formally technically writing alongside, my day job, which was like doing work at HSBC. So I was still very much working with HSBC at this point. And then I think 2021 towards the end, um I had a lot of commitments at home, and I also was like, I wanted to do something that was more into the open source space. So I started looking out, and luckily there was a technical writer position available with my current company. So I asked my former manager Hayden, um, whether the remote actually meant remote, because typically
yeah,
when people write remote, it means only American remote or European remote. It doesn't mean Indian. So he's like, no, it actually doesn't mean Indian remote, but let me see if I can actually work it out. Um, he told me, he's like, I'm really impressed by your profile, so if you could just let me give me a bit of time and see if I can work it out, it'd be great. So uh spoiler alert, it worked out. And that is how I ended up being a technical writer in like for a really long, I'm not really long, like 9 months. So that is how I ended up like being a technical writer. And now I'm also one of the maintainers for the Kubernetes documentation. That also happened really simultaneously. So like the job changed, the maintainer for documentation, and I was like, wow, this is all falling into place, isn't it, right now? So yeah, that's how it
It
happened.
sounds like pretty exciting. You had like a quite of a roller coaster right there. And so yeah, just like you mentioned, after not having the first opportunity at your hand, you did meet certain mentors. So how did that mentors come into play, and how do you think like is it important to have mentors while you're while you're in transitioning of your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of weight is associated with mentorship, and when you say mentorship, you normally assume that it's just going to be like one person telling you what to do with your life and it's done. But I really feel like you learn things from every person you meet. I genuinely believe that. So maybe I wouldn't say that you call everyone your mentor. That I'm not going to say. But there are going to be some key people in your life who are going to teach you more, who you are going to interact with more, and whose input you are going to seek out more, because of the fact that they are on a maybe not on a similar level, but they are on a more accessible level to you, and you're able to reach out to them, the comfort level or whatever else. But there are mentors, and I believe that you should seek them out. Like for the Google season of docs, it is typically like at least when I started out, I was really apprehensive to reach out to them even. So participants are normally encouraged to reach out to the mentors. They'll be listed on the Google season of docs website. You just have to mail them. I was like, why would anybody at CERN even entertain me? Because I'm not a formal writer. I have like, I just have like, I know Markdown and I know I can write. I know the different static site generators. Like I had a brief overview by then. So why would anybody hire me? But they took a chance on my potential. It makes a lot of difference when people take a chance on you, and you have to reach out to them to do that. If I had not reached out, I'd probably not be here, is the long and short of it. So when you want to seek out mentors, the universe does give you the chance, but it's
Yeah.
also on you to take that first step and reach out to them. So
I
yeah.
completely align with what you said. So my master's college actually had this line written over all over the wall, like 20 seconds of insane courage is all you need.
Yes,
That 20 seconds when you decide, okay, I will give it a shot no matter what. I think that's what matters.
absolutely.
Yeah, sounds amazing. And okay, so from going being a bookworm, being a reader and a writer, how did you first become interested in the role of advocating for things? You are a developer advocate and a technical evangelist as well.
Yeah.
So from reader and writer to a speaker, how did that journey?
So, fun fact, when I was a child, like I was a child because like
Yeah.
it sounds very derogatory, but when I was younger, I used to be very interested in like elocution competitions and talking. Like you probably know by now that I talk a lot. Like you've been interviewing me for the past like what 30-ish minutes, so I talk a lot. But also the fact is that in addition to my talking, I realized that my talking could lead to something. Like that connection needed to be made always. Like I can't just ramble on about stuff and expect people to understand what I mean when I say things. So my passion for tech came about because of my sister, and then a lot of mentors and role
Yeah.
models along the way. And via advocacy, via advocating for tech, I felt like I could also empower other
And
minorities in tech to actually come on board. I don't mean to say that I'm some inspirational figure. I don't mean that way, but I feel like if they see a person out there who looks like them, who probably sounds a lot like them, they probably might feel a little more better, right? So that was like the maybe the second thought I had. But the first thought I had was, hey, I'm actually good at talking, I'm actually good at tech. and I'm also good at communicating. So maybe, I should see if there's something for me that, combines all of these three together. When I started out, there was not a role that actually spoke to this. Like, developer advocacy was not really a fad or a trend back in 2013. I know for sure because I was hoping there was some role like this. Not because of anything else, because I genuinely like talking to people about tech. I like working on tech, not gonna lie there, but I also like talking to people about it.
Yeah.
And that was my aim. And I think I always sort of kept my eyes open when I wanted, like, um you know I, I don't know, maybe it's me manifesting this whole job discipline. I don't know what happened, but I think that is it. Because, yeah, like, it was me manifesting my job role in the truest of senses, because this is what I think. I at least feel like I'm good at writing and talking, and I'm good. I love text, so
Yeah.
this is my dream job. I keep telling people that. I was like, what more could you want? Like, I get to do cool things. I get to hang out at conferences. I get to talk to people about technology, which I love. I get to learn new technology. I don't have to be worried if they, you know. So my previous job involved fixing things when, um, things broke, and when customers were trying to access them. So I keep telling people I don't have to worry about that now. I can actually just focus on learning the tech,
Yeah.
and not worry about, like, oh my god, what if I break things when a customer is accessing it. So I don't have that burden either. So when all of these came together, and I realized that there was a whole job discipline, I was like, okay, I maybe manifested this whole thing, because this was not very much a thing when I started out. So
Yeah.
I'm really happy I got here, to be
Yeah.
very honest.
Yeah, I think developer advocacy like really took up once people realized how communities can accelerate your growth, and community
Yeah,
learning is better than competitive learning in some aspects. So
yeah,
yes, definitely, like there was a wave when all of this got really
yeah.
accelerated. Yeah, so talking about how you discussed how it's important to kind of put structure into your technical thoughts via words that are understandable by everyone. How do you usually communicate between product and development?
Oh yeah, that's definitely a challenge for sure. Because how we all use different ways to say the same thing, right? Like, if I am saying, so if I, as a person, as an operator or as an administrator, I'm using a particular application, the person who's developing the application will not use the same terminology or the same things, because he has a very different view of the application. So
Yeah,
the whole thing is, when it comes to developer advocacy or developer relations, the first thing that I do is put myself in their shoes, because
yeah,
that is and empathize with them, because I obviously have worked as a person who uses technology a lot of times, and I have developed shell scripts at best. At this point, I have not developed things, like, not developed a software for sure. But I understand the pains of developers, because I've worked alongside developers for a lot of my career, like nearly 9+ years of my career. I have heard developers griping about very specific stuff. Like, I know what it feels like to be in their shoes, because I took the opportunities of having conversations with them when things were actually broken on a production call. So
yeah,
that, I think, was the formative experience that led me to actually take this job up as well, and get me that experience of putting myself in that shoes of another person and figuring out what their pain points were. So when it comes to balancing, or talking to either side, that is what is the first thing that I do, because obviously I do not know what your pain points are unless I actually communicate with you.
yeah,
And it's absolutely essential that I speak your language. It's absolutely essential that we're on the same page. So
Yeah.
you gotta, have those conversations. It could be as simple as a coffee chat. It doesn't necessarily need to be like this, actual meeting with 10,000 people in attendance. It doesn't need to be that. You connect
Yeah.
with other people in your organization, you talk to them over coffee chats. And because I'm remotely working, it definitely has to be virtual. So there is that challenge as well. So it's like that, like you connect over coffee chats, you connect over Zoom calls, you put yourself in their positions, write up summaries of your meetings, see if that checks out with the other person you just had, a coffee chat with. That's how I keep, tabs of how, the other person or the other people in that specific role speak about the technologies that I am working with. So
Yeah.
it makes sense for that. And then when it comes to developers, I also do the same with them, because again, they are going to have like a wholly different terminology and vocabulary when it comes to the project or the product that you're using. So
Yeah.
understanding that is another challenge. So that empathizing with them and stepping into their shoes is like the first thing that I do. And then doing that regularly and doing that consistently is what matters, because you can lose touch,
Yes.
right? I mean, you can say, oh, you know what, I've been doing this for so long, it's fine, I mean, I know everything. That's very easy to come by in tech, because um it's like, you get overconfident about your skills. But unfortunately, um people are not software. There are
Yeah.
different people to meet every single time, and there is a different thing to learn from every person you meet across the way, across not along the way, sorry. So
Yeah.
I make sure to keep talking to people from different parts of the organization, from different parts of the world, really,
Yeah.
to understand where they are at, understand what language and vocabulary they use when it comes to the projects that I work with. So yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, it's just very nice to have you explain how beautifully you explain, just like how it's very important to have that narrative that establishes a common point of view between different kind of people who have like different biases coming from their experiences. So yeah, that was really amazing. Okay, so since you said like you shifted from writing and reading to then advocating, how did open source continue to play a role in your career throughout all of this?
Yeah, so like I said, I work in a company that's primarily open source. Like SUSE
Yeah.
is a company that is known for being open source. And
Yeah.
another fun fact is SUSE's inception date and my birthday come together. So like I was like, this is a match made in heaven. The moment I received the offer letter, I was like, this is a match made in heaven. I'm just gonna like say yes to the company. But in general, it is an open source company, and the cloud native suite of things is something that I actively continue to work upon. I am, like I also said before, I'm a maintainer for documentation on the Kubernetes project, and
Yeah.
I'm also an ambassador for the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which houses a lot of the open source cloud native projects. Like Kubernetes is one of them, but there are a bunch of projects around Kubernetes that have developed and made it into an ecosystem. So I am an ambassador for that foundation as well. So um, that's continued to play a role, because I have been consistently involved with the Kubernetes project and other projects in the ecosystem in different capacities. And um, in my advisory role to Avesha, which is another company that I work with, again, I work on the open source side of things. So I have a strong connect to the open source side of things, primarily because I started off wanting to be in open source when I started my journey late in 2019, early 2000, sorry, 20. So that's how I think I stayed on track. Otherwise, it's easy to lose sight of your destination if you don't actually
Right.
actively pursue it. So that's how I think I actually managed to stay continuously in open source, and maintain that same track throughout my journey.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, so with someone like you and having assumed different roles in the tech industries, now we've talked for a while, so we know you a bit. So definitely not a skill that you've held on to, but it's more about having the mindset about learning. So
Hmm.
what do you think is the most important thing for someone in your position to always have in mind?
Um, First, like I said, is the mindset of learning. But other than that, I would, first very much advocate for, you know, I know this sounds very cliche, but I'm going to say that, be a nice person in general. Like, we already have too much of negativity and hatred in the tech industry. We don't need more of that. So when you're a nice person who's not a doormat, and you know how to advocate for yourself, I think opportunities do find their way. It's a matter of, again, keeping your eyes open to the opportunities around you. And then obviously, once those opportunities present themselves, you have to also learn and adapt and do a bunch of other things. Not going to say no, but the first thing is to be a nice normal person, because we have a lot of toxicity anyway going around. For a like person like me who basically had no experience in development, to actually do a 180-degree shift to working on shell scripts and bash scripts and starting to review things like that, and then jumping into a completely different sphere of open source, it was not an easy job. I won't say it's easy, although it does look easy in retrospect, because it feels like the dots were connected. Uh, but that is in retrospect, right? Like, if you'd asked me in 2020 where are you headed, I probably wouldn't know. I was like, okay, let me just get on with my next day. That would be my first thing. So although I knew I liked open source, I did not know that it would lead to here. And today, if you ask me where I'm headed, I don't know. Like, I'm just thinking about the next day. I'm thinking about how to, get done and, move on to my next task. That is it. What I'd say is that, advocate for yourself. Even if you're a nice, kind person, it doesn't make sense that, you do a good job and stay quiet about it, because it's not that easily visible to another person, because they're wrapped in their own realities and they're wrapped in their own side of things, so they might not really notice you. So it's your job to actually stand up for yourself, which is why that is the most important thing. And I wish I had known that earlier when I started off, because it's the first thing that I would say to anyone starting off in any career, that talk about yourself, talk about the work that you do. I mean, do work, but also talk about it. Like, just don't talk about things that you've not done. That I'm not going to say, but talk about things that you do. Do work, do your good work, do a good job, do a brilliant job, but also talk about the stuff that you do, because that's extremely important.
Yeah, I think definitely recognition does play a role. And yes, if we are supportive of people, I think it does help them take on new challenges and learn with the community as well.
Yep.
So, what do you see in the future of open source? What's the next big thing coming through?
Oh, so now there's a huge thing around licensing and security, because like you said before, right? The very first hindrance towards or blocker towards adoption with a lot of open source projects is the security that they offer. And with the recent attacks that have happened, wherein major security flaws have been discovered in, like, really fundamental projects, that pretty much every uh, you know library that is relevant to that particular language the uses it, it's important that we secure the way we build and we publish open source projects. So security is one big thing that is going to gain a lot of traction. And when it comes to the licensing part of it, when it comes to the not just the licensing, but the training and all of the other stuff, that is another big issue, because a lot of people have confusion, because open source has just boomed over the last, I don't know, 6 7 years. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of interest around its adoption, but not a lot of people understand licenses. Because when you talk about proprietary source products, like maybe a product that you've used for a really long time, they know, okay, this is a license, these are the associated clauses, you're not allowed to distribute, that's it. You can run stuff on top of it, or you can run something alongside it, but you cannot distribute your own version of that particular product. So
Yeah.
people understood that, but open source is a lot more mushy and vague, and the licensing is a really really important component given where we are headed. Because with AI and ML coming into the picture, with more complicated structures coming into the picture, wherein there is um, there is a human component involved, wherein you're prompting an AI or an ML to actually give you a very specifically designed snippet of a technology. It could very well not be um, a good way of crafting content, or including it in your whatever, I mean whatever books or material that you're publishing. So this is just a generative AI reference, but there are so many potential licensing loopholes that need to sort of be addressed. And it's not just loopholes, it's like the licensing thing is something that's going to boom over the next couple of years, in my opinion. Because that's another sphere that is going to take prominence when it comes to a lot of these complex technologies that are evolving side by side.
Yeah, completely agree. And with the with the pace that now the masses have started accepting technology, I think there's more information coming in about what is data, how do we need to manage it, what is important of privacy. So I think yes, definitely I can see what you're talking about, how licensing is coming in.
Yeah.
Amazing. It was pretty insightful and like very great learning experience to have this discussion with you. And I am definitely leaving inspired with this talk, and I would definitely look forward to knowing you more. So before we close, do you have any advice for women in tech who are looking to move into kind of a leadership role?
So, like you said earlier on, like one of my biggest regrets is that I didn't learn to advocate for myself. So even if one person listening to this podcast actually learns to advocate for themselves and their work in public, I think my job is done. That is the major takeaway I've had across my journey in tech and otherwise, that nobody is going to take notice of you unless you advocate for yourself and you show up and you do the work. Obviously the doing the work component, a lot of us do. A lot of us really do a really good job of you
Yeah.
know whatever roles are assigned to us and whatever tasks are assigned to us, we do a good job. But it but we somehow don't get a seat at the table. And I know that's a bigger problem to solve, but the first thing is you need to actually say that, hey, you know what, I have actually done this work, so maybe I deserve a chance at the table, maybe I
Yeah.
deserve a seat at the table. So why not take me? So that initiative needs to be there. And that is something that I did not do for a really long time, and I hope other people learn from my mistakes. So that is the only advice that I'd probably give, and that is not even an advice, that's just a lesson I have learned and I'm passing it on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that great advice. And the more we get to know about you, the less we think we know of you. So, where can we actually find out more about you? How do our listeners get to connect with you and like just talk in general?
So I'm there on LinkedIn, I'm there on Twitter, I'm there on Blue Sky, I'm there on Mastodon. So I mean, wherever you are, like I'm forever online. I'm really, really online most of the time. So I think I will share the links with you folks, and you could probably put it somewhere. But yeah, I'm there on all probable forms of social media that are in existence today. And I am very much online. So please feel free to reach out. I'd be really happy to have a conversation, uh, because it's always great, like I said at the start, to connect with other women in tech and to connect with other folks in tech, really, because I get to learn from you all. And what is life if not learning? So So yeah,
Yes, amazing. Thank you. Thank you for this amazing session. Thank you for being here. And thank you all for listening to the Women Who Code podcast.
thank you so much for having me on.
Pleasure. Yeah.